presented more formally at COP26, the 26th Conference of Parties of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Very warm welcome to all. My name is Olivier De Schutter. I am the Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty and Human Rights, and I am the co-chair of the International Panel of Experts on Sustainable Food Systems, that is one of the parties having initiated this Glasgow Declaration together with Nourish Scotland and a number of other partner organizations in this event. The Glasgow Food and Climate Declaration is a declaration that a range of cities and regions have adopted and shall adopt in the next few months, so that the declaration will be formally presented in November at the COP26 meeting. And it was initiated by groups who believe that it is now important for local governments, cities, regions, not to wait for initiatives to be taken by national governments in order to move towards sustainable food systems that reduce the greenhouse gas emissions in particular. I would like to briefly introduce the discussion we're going to have, but first allow me to make two remarks concerning the way we use this Zoom facility to meet. First of all, there is on your screen, on the right-hand side, at the bottom line of the screen, there is a box for interpretation, and you may choose within that box if you wish to listen to the interventions from the floor without interpretation, or whether you wish to benefit from interpretation that we have in English, French, or Spanish. So there shall be some interventions in languages other than English, and therefore it may be appropriate for those of you who listen to me without interpretation now to switch to the English channel. The second mention I'd like to make is that we shall have some time during this 1.5 hour discussion for a Q&A session. You will be able to express your concerns or formulate your questions. Those will be summarized, and they will be summarized based on the way you formulate these questions in the conversation box that you also have at the bottom line of this of the Zoom screen that you have. And finally, let me note that this event is being recorded. The recording will be made public, so that if you want not to be seen, you should switch off your video in order not to appear on the event as it shall be recorded. So just a few words to introduce the topic of today. The Glasgow Food and Climate Declaration is based on the idea that cities, municipalities, but also regions, local governments have a major role to play in moving to sustainable food systems. And that is first of all because they can use a number of tools that are highly relevant to move to sustainable food systems, whether we think of public procurement, whether we think of land planning, land zoning ordinances, or whether we think of the different ways in which food waste can be combated and discouraged. Moreover, it is at the local level that the integration of different sectorial policies is easiest to achieve. And as we know, the food environment is shaped by a range of policies that are often disconnected with one another. And I look forward to Pete Ritchie's intervention, who will certainly explain this in greater depth. And thirdly, and finally, at the local level, we can create tools of accountability and cooperation with citizens-led initiatives that can stimulate action and ensure that progress moves at the right speed. So for all these reasons, there is an obvious and important role that cities and local governments may play to move us towards sustainable food systems. However, and that is what the Glasgow Declaration also emphasizes, those local efforts have to be supported by higher levels of government. We need, in other terms, not only horizontal coordination across different policy areas, but also vertical coordination between different levels of governance. And for example, what is done in a city such as Milan, in a region such as Scotland, or in a city such as Belo Horizonte, needs to be supported by what is done at the national level, the federal level, or the international level or the EU level for European local governments. And that is particularly important because over the past years, we have seen the very opposite of supporting local efforts to build effective and sustainable food systems. We have seen a lengthening of supply chains. We have seen an emphasis on efficiency gains through specialization and division of labor across world regions. And we have seen the development of global supply chains to achieve economies of scale, the very opposite of what is needed for diversified farming systems to flourish at local level to serve the needs of local communities. So this is why governance matters to achieve this transition to local sustainable food systems. It is because the system is very inert and difficult to move despite all the negative externalities that it is producing. So it is in this context that the Glasgow Food and Climate Declaration should be placed. And I'm very delighted to welcome on this panel a range of extremely influential people who are very closely involved in this reflection to build more sustainable food systems, starting with the local governments. And I'd like to start by giving the floor to my very dear friend, Pete Ritchie, the Executive Director of Nourish Scotland, who shall introduce in a few minutes the content of the Glasgow Food and Climate Declaration. Pete, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Olivier. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone on the call. Truly, the road from Paris to Glasgow goes through the farm gate. There is no way we can deliver on the Paris Agreement and keep global warming in check unless we transform the way we do food and farming. And this is not just about reducing greenhouse gas emissions from the food system. At the same time, we must also respect and restore nature, and we must increase diversity in our fields and on our plates. And we must ensure that all those working in food can enjoy sustainable livelihoods. Finally, we must deliver on the right to food, achieving zero hunger and providing universal access to a healthy, sustainable diet. This is what just transition means in the food system. So, as Olivier said, local governments of all shapes and sizes are so important in this huge global transformation. First, because they hold many of the levers for change. Through public procurement, they can support change in diets and in food production systems. What happens when we turn the public kitchen organic can lead the way for all our kitchens. And thank you, Copenhagen, for doing that. They can use their planning powers to support healthier food outlets or to ban junk food advertising in public places. And thank you, London, for doing that. They can open up space for food growing inside the city walls. Thank you, Johannesburg, for doing that. And where they do have wider powers over land use, they can transform agricultural practices and they can turn a whole state organic. Thank you, Andhra Pradesh, for doing that. Second, local governments are closer to the citizens. While national governments exhort, local governments deliver. The citizens of Seoul recycle 95% of their food waste. And on Thursdays, half the citizens of Ghent eat their veggies. And third, and in many ways most important, because local government is trusted, often more than national government. The change we need to make is both political and personal, and we need trusted local voices to guide it. The Glasgow Declaration, as Olivier says, commits the signatories to horizontal integration of policy and calls on national government to support those efforts and to truly consider local government when they're formulating national policies, but also to learn from local government and to learn from the initiatives happening all over the world. This declaration is the result of work by so many partners, too many to mention them all here. I would like to thank deeply our colleagues in IPES-Food, also in the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact, in ICLE, in Recolto, the EAT Forum, 50 by 40, the Under 2 Coalition, the FAO, Too Good to Go, Carbon Neutral Cities Alliance, RUAF, the Sustainable Food Places project here in the UK, and the City of Glasgow and to Scottish Government, and to all those from governments around the world who contributed to the many rounds of drafting. All of us at Nourish Scotland and our partners look forward to working with you over the next year to build on this declaration and truly to bring food to COP26 in Glasgow. Thank you.
Many thanks, Pete from Nourish Scotland, for having introduced us to the Glasgow Food and Climate Declaration and for having traveled us across the world from Seoul to Andhra Pradesh via Copenhagen and the many other cities that you mentioned, all of whom have been showing in different ways how local governments have a major role to play to cool the planet by reforming food systems at local level. So let me now turn to the representative of the FAO in this discussion, Dr. Jamie Morrison, who is Director of Food Systems and Food Safety Division within the FAO. And the FAO, of course, the organization that is even older than the United Nations itself, has done an important job in raising awareness about these issues. And I welcome very much Dr. Morrison on this event, for him to express the willingness of FAO to help in this discussion. Mr. Morrison, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Olivier, and it's my pleasure to be with all of you today at the launch of the Glasgow Food and Climate Declaration. But let me start with a few key facts. Cities are significant contributors to climate change, accounting for about 70% of global energy-related greenhouse gas emissions. Food systems emit 30% of greenhouse gases, of which food loss and waste is among the 5 largest contributors. Globally, we see large tracts of agricultural land being converted for urban development and industrial use. Deforestation linked to urban sprawl leads to biodiversity loss, and many cities are overexploiting water resources. At the same time, about 70% of food produced globally is already consumed by urban inhabitants. And this number is projected to increase further with processes of urbanization and also changing consumption behaviors. And many of the urban and peri-urban communities are particularly exposed to food and nutrition insecurity, generally combined with the diffusion of diet-related non-communicable diseases. So this is all to say that we need to act now to support local and regional governments worldwide in better mainstreaming food systems approaches within their policies, planning and actions. And at the Food and Agriculture Organization, we're increasing our work with cities, recognizing the key role of cities and local governments in promoting the sustainable and inclusive transformation required to deliver on the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Through this support, FAO promotes a better understanding of the linkages between climate change, urban food system development, and green spaces in urban and peri-urban areas. And this is why FAO has recently launched 2 key programs. Last year, we launched the Urban Food Agenda, which aims to promote urban food system transformation. And it's under that program that FAO has been supporting the process of development of the Glasgow Declaration to encourage cities and relevant stakeholders to act. In September this year, we launched the Green Cities Initiative, the main objective of which is to increase people's well-being through better access to improved products and services provided by peri-urban and urban agriculture, forestry, and food systems. And through this initiative, we call on local governments to incorporate food systems and green spaces into their urban and territorial plans and actions to promote green and inclusive transformation, including job generation and youth engagement. So to deliver on the climate action ambition and the sustainable development goals, UN agencies, international city and regional networks, and donors all need to work together to create an enabling environment that empowers local and regional governments with appropriate resources and robust links to national policy making, as Olivier has mentioned. And this has become only more apparent with the COVID-19 pandemic. This has shed light on the importance of collaboration between different spheres of governance. It's highlighted the vital role of local and regional governments as key enablers in tackling global crises. And a survey that we conducted in May this year illustrated the many actions that local governments are taking, despite the fact that in most cases they didn't have access to additional resources to ensure that food was delivered to their communities during the pandemic. The pandemic continues to challenge the way that we live our lives and the resilience of food systems. And we need to work together at all levels to reorientate our actions towards more systemic and integrated solutions that are aimed at building back better. And in addressing these urgent needs, we need to take the opportunity to embed longer-term sustainable solutions. So finally, just to point out that the UN Food Systems Summit, as well as COP26, which will both be held towards the end of next year, provide key opportunities to raise the voice of local governments in the global arena. And we look forward to strengthening our cooperation and collaboration with all of you to ensure that we use these processes to move forward together towards the achievement of the 2030 Agenda. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mr. Morrison, for this very robust intervention, allowing us not only to learn about the Urban Food Agenda 2019 and the Green Cities Initiative 2020 that the FAO is supporting, but also replacing this discussion in the broader framework of the Sustainable Development Goals, which include a reference to the need to strengthen urban-rural linkages, which is exactly what these initiatives that local governments can take serve to advance. So my thanks again to the FAO and to Dr. Morrison. I now would like to turn to the Minister of Rural Affairs and Natural Environment of the Scottish Government, Miss Mary Goujon, with my apologies for perhaps mispronouncing the name, which I read in French. Mary Goujon was first elected at the Scottish Parliament in 2016 and now has the rank of Minister in the Scottish Government. And we very much welcome the leadership that Glasgow and Scotland are taking in this initiative. Ms. Goujon, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for that introduction. And in fact, you're one of the only people to have ever pronounced my name correctly. So well done. So yeah, thank you very much for that. And I'm absolutely delighted to have the opportunity to speak about Scotland's approach to food and climate change to an audience which is participating from all over the world. And thank you for taking the time to attend this event, as I know time differences must mean that it's either very early or very late in the day for some of you. But as you'll all be aware, this is the time of year that we hope that we would be welcoming people to Glasgow from all over the world to take part in COP26. But unfortunately, the COVID-19 pandemic has meant that many events have needed to be changed just to keep people safe. And obviously COP26 was no exception to that. So we welcome the decision to postpone, and we're looking forward to hosting a safe, secure, inspiring and very ambitious event next year in November 2021. And I do hope that many of you will be able to participate in that. But turning to today's event, I'm very pleased to contribute to the launch of the Glasgow Food and Climate Declaration. I am delighted to announce that the Scottish Government is the first government in the world to sign this new declaration. And I think that's, of course, appropriate because given that Glasgow, our largest city, is due to be host to COP26. But we're keen for this new declaration on food and climate, the Glasgow Declaration, to capture the imagination and support of other national, regional and state governments. So I would encourage you to follow the lead of Scotland and sign up too. Now, Scotland was one of the first countries in the world to declare a global climate emergency, and we've since legislated for the world's most ambitious framework for emissions reduction. We're also one of the first to recognise the intrinsic link between climate change and biodiversity loss, and to try and tackle them on a twin crises basis. Tackling climate change is already at the heart of Scotland's recovery from COVID-19, and we remain absolutely committed to a just transition to net zero emissions by 2045. And we'll publish our update to the 2018 Climate Change Plan later on this month. And that will essentially set out the policies that will be boosted, accelerated, or introduced to put Scotland on a clear and urgent pathway to meet our ambitious new emissions targets as part of a green recovery from COVID-19. Farming and the wider rural economy and our world-class food and drink sector sector will be expected to play their part in contributing to the delivery of our targets, driving further innovation and really capitalising on the economic and cross-cutting opportunities that are presented in the Climate Change Plan update. And we're also taking an active role in shaping the post-2020 global biodiversity framework and targets for the next decade. We're adopting a leadership role on the natural environment, and we want to ensure that we can deliver further biodiversity improvements in Scotland. We're not carrying out this work in isolation, and we are, of course, working with many other global partners in that. Scotland was recently appointed the European co-chair of the Under2 Coalition, which is a group of more than 220 governments representing over 1.3 billion people and 43% of the global economy. With 19 members, including Scotland, now having set net zero targets for 2050 or earlier, it's clear that the Under2 Coalition has a crucial role to play in setting the world on a course to a net zero future. And as co-chair, we'll use our platform to build on green recovery plans, both in Scotland and internationally, and drive ambition and momentum towards COP26 and further beyond that too. And in doing so, we'll champion inclusivity and promote just transition principles within the coalition. Scotland also has a leading role in the Edinburgh process, where we've mobilised a global network of governments, cities and local authorities to help shape the development of a new post-2020 global biodiversity framework and targets, and through the Edinburgh Declaration to ensure delivery across all areas of government. The Edinburgh Declaration sets out the commitments needed at local levels, and it's essentially a call to our counterparts to take stronger actions and make bolder decisions across the coming decade. And these are just some of the actions that Scotland is taking, which highlight the importance of working together and the vital role that all levels of government have in translating global and national strategies into real and tangible actions. In terms of the actions Scotland is taking in relation to food systems, I'll provide a snapshot of our wide-ranging work that contributes to our commitment that by 2025, Scotland will be a good food nation. And the vision is that people from every walk of life take pride and take pleasure in and benefit from the food that they produce, buy, cook, serve and eat each day. For example, it's obviously well known that our physical health is closely linked to what we eat, but there are other less apparent health benefits associated with food. I met recently with representatives of the Community Growing Forum who were telling me how much the people that they support value the importance of growing their own food. And that's been especially important during the COVID-19 pandemic. And they spoke about that added value that that had for people's welfare, for their mental health, by providing that safe environment for people to meet up, to have a chat and really to get some exercise outdoors. As well as health benefits, growing food helps people to really learn more about where their food comes from. Our Good Food Futures programme, which was launched in June last year, brings together government-funded projects to ensure a more joined-up approach to food education, planning and delivery. And although many of the activities, such as farm visits for school children, have sadly been unable to take place during the pandemic, our programme partners, such as the Royal Highland Education Trust, have been very innovative in providing access to a range of material so that children can continue to learn about food and farming. We're also looking at the way our food is grown. We're supporting farmers, crofters and land managers to meet Scotland's climate ambitions, as well as delivering wider biodiversity and environmental benefits. And that included appointing 4 young farmer climate change champions who worked through peer-to-peer learning to highlight how farmers could improve efficiency, reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, reduce costs, as well as enhancing the sustainability of their businesses. We're committed to supporting locally sourced and produced food and drink to help reduce food miles and to develop sustainable supply chains, and have committed to developing a local food strategy. We provide £400,000 each year to the Soil Association to run and expand the Food for Life programme to get fresh, local, sustainable food onto school dinner plates. And that programme has a particular focus on primary schools across Scotland, and it now covers 15 local authority areas, serving 19 million meals each year. Now, we also want everyone in Scotland to have the means to have ready access to food that meets their needs and preferences. And we're supporting communities to respond to food insecurity in a way that promotes dignity and tackles the causes of poverty by strengthening household budgets. We continue to directly challenge the causes of food insecurity by promoting the living wage and by embedding a human rights approach in the design and delivery of our new Scottish social security system, putting money in people's pockets. Last year alone, we invested £1.96 billion in supporting low-income households. We want everyone to be able to enjoy the food they eat, and household income shouldn't be a barrier to accessing a nutritious diet. Scotland's food and drink sector is also a global success story that's vital to our international reputation, to attracting people to live and visit here, as well as being a significant contributor to our economy. Now, COVID-19 has, of course, hit many parts of that sector very hard. So we're working with the industry to implement a food and drink recovery plan and supporting that plan with £5 million of funding. And a key aspect of that is supporting the sector to reduce its emissions and become more sustainable in the longer term, not least in being able to reach more customers, audiences, and markets that are closer to home. Resilience and security are now key, and that means taking a more integrated and coherent approach to food policy. And one way we'll do this is by developing a non-statutory statement of policy on food. And this will be overseen by a ministerial working group on food, of which I'm a member. The ministerial working group is well placed to oversee the development of the statement and ensure that the cross-cutting approach that's needed to take forward key aspects of national policy is in place. And the fact that we've put in place a ministerial working group in food, which incorporates a range of portfolios across government, shows that we want at the highest level to engage cohesively and coherently to develop food policy. And that group will be key to monitoring our efforts to meet the aims of the Glasgow Declaration across all parts of the Scottish Government. Scotland is blessed with an amazing natural larder, one that many of you, I'm sure, will have enjoyed in the past, and we want you to be able to continue to enjoy that in the future. But we need to ensure that what we produce and how we produce it, who gets to enjoy it and benefit from its production, meets our wider economic, social, and environmental priorities. And I know that others will be facing similar challenges. But as we all work to tackle climate change and to address food-related issues, we can do that by collaborating and cooperating and really learning from each other as we go. So supporting this declaration would be a fantastic place to start. And again, I would encourage everyone to sign up. So, and just to draw to a close, we really do look forward to hosting you at COP26 next year and really setting the world on a course to end climate change and ecological decline. And I hope that many of you will be able to participate in that with us next year. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mary Goujon, for these very encouraging words. And also thank you for drawing our attention to the need not to leave low-income households behind, so that good food is not a privilege of the few who can afford an adequate, sustainable diet. Thank you also for mentioning the leadership role that Scotland is taking as the co-chair of the European co-chair of the Under 2 Coalition, which is a very important network that can make such a huge difference. And the Glasgow Declaration is one way to encourage all local actors to take their responsibilities seriously towards becoming what you call a good food nation. And we wish you all the best, of course, to achieve this by 2025. So let me now turn to a few local governments that have, as Glasgow has, pledged to make progress towards building sustainable food systems, and some of whom have signed up to the declaration, the Food and Climate Declaration of Glasgow. And I start with Mayor Justin Elicker from New Haven in Connecticut, United States. It is a great pleasure really to have Mayor Elicker with us today. New Haven is one of the first signatories of the Glasgow Food and Climate Declaration, and New Haven has been remarkably forthcoming in building a sustainable local food system by a food policy council that is really a model for many others across not only the US, but in the world, who try to democratize food systems. And so my question to Mayor Elicker, that shall be the same for other participants from local governments, is, first of all, what is the city of New Haven doing that, that illustrates the potential of local governments in moving to sustainable food systems, and what are the results of the policies put in place. Mayor Eddiker, thank you for joining us. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much for having me. I have had so many local Zoom conversations that it's nice to have this international Zoom conversation and see just how much work is being done across the world on this important issue. I've been involved in the food and agriculture sector prior to my most recent role as mayor that I started January 1st. And it's heartening to see so much work going on around the world on this issue. New Haven is a small city. We're around 130,000 people with an annual budget around $550 million. So when we think about how we as a city can play a role in this very important initiative, our staff can focus on food-related issues, but our ability feels relatively small. As you may know, there are only about 20 food policy divisions in municipal governments in the US. And our food system policy division is relatively new, having only been established in 2016. The current director of the division, Latha Swami, who's on the call today as well, has been in her role for only just over 2 years. New Haven's mission around food policy work is to support and help community-led efforts to create an environmentally sustainable and socially just food system. Therefore, our food policy division, in collaboration with New Haven's Food Policy Council, operates through a framework of food justice and across 3 primary pathways: health equity, socioeconomic justice, and environmental justice. And many of the current policies that we're working on fall into the intersection of these 3 areas. The city's also recently created a climate emergency mobilization task force, to which Latha has also been appointed. The work of City Hall staff, while vital, is small compared to the incredible network in New Haven of food-related groups that work in urban agriculture, food business incubation, entrepreneurship, composting, food education, and many other food-related issues. What will lead to our success in New Haven is the active network of nonprofits and volunteer organizations that inspire, envision, and take action. There's a few examples that I'll give very quickly on the initiatives that we're working on. First is an effort to support small food business entrepreneurs. The Food Policy Division wrote in New Haven's Board of Alders, which is our legislative body in New Haven, recently passed a micro food business and shared kitchen user license. The ordinance supports small food business entrepreneurs by reducing the economic and regulatory barriers to accessing commercial kitchen space in New Haven. Since the approval of the ordinance, the Food Policy Division has assisted a number of food entrepreneurs through the licensing process and connected them to city and community resources necessary to establish and grow their businesses in New Haven. As many know, investments in shared kitchens offer inclusive economic opportunities. And a 2016 survey of kitchen incubators by American Communities Trust found that 53% of kitchen renters were women and 28% were people of color. The shared commercial kitchen has become an important tool for overcoming obstacles entrepreneurs with limited resources face when entering the food industry, especially people from historically marginalized communities and neighborhoods and of lower socioeconomic status. New Haven's goal is to utilize the many shared commercial kitchen spaces in the region to create low barrier urban employment opportunities and creating unique value-added products and encouraging sourcing from local regional sources such as small urban and peri-urban farms. I know that we're starting to see this success because I've myself partaken in many of these value-added products and that have come from these small entrepreneurs. So it's an inspiring initiative. The second initiative that I'd like to highlight is working to develop more equitable urban agricultural systems in New Haven. Recently, we're very proud to share that New Haven received 2 very large competitive grants from the federal government, specifically the U.S. Department of Agriculture grant of $500,000 and a second one of $90,000 to focus on composting. And over the course of 3 years, we plan on using the $500,000 grant to develop the first New Haven Urban Agriculture Master Plan The goal is to create an effective response that's transparent, fair, efficient, user-friendly, and predictable, but flexible to access land and opportunities in order to support the production and sale of locally grown foods, build community, improve public health and well-being, and provide economic opportunity. And with the smaller grant, the city will be working very closely with our partners to expand community-level composting and lay the groundwork for a citywide composting program that aims to reduce city disposal costs, create economic activity and jobs, and of course, mitigate environmental impacts. The third initiative that I wanted to highlight is that we're working to build and strengthen institutional partnerships, for example, with public schools, hospital system, universities, and within New Haven to move towards a more sustainable and ethical food procurement practice, and make sure that there's shorter local regional supply chains. Every year, public institutions across the United States, from school districts and city governments, spend $150 billion on food with virtually no oversight or awareness of under what condition these foods were produced. And our team is working towards a vision of implementing a good food purchasing program, the goal of which is to provide a framework and a set of tools to create greater transparency and accountability in public food procurement and encourage large public institutions to direct their buying power towards 5 core values: local economies, environmental sustainability, valued workforce, nutritional health, and animal welfare. These are just 3 examples of the work that Latha and her team are doing. And we have a lot of work to do, of course, but we're very enthusiastic, particularly about our partnerships internationally and the support and lessons that we can learn from you all to reach this goal. Thanks.
Thank you very much indeed, Mayor Eliker from New Haven, for these very stimulating remarks. $150 billion per year in public procurement for food across the US. That is a huge lever that could be used indeed. And it's striking that in the EU, there is now a coalition forming to demand a food exception in public procurement legislation in order to allow for local sourcing of food, preventing the that otherwise may be an obstacle to local entities using that tool to build local food systems. So it's extremely encouraging to see that this is one of the 3 tools, amongst others, that New Haven is intending to use in the future. Let me now turn to Ms. Susan Aitken, leader of Glasgow City Council, which has been already mentioned quite a few times, the example of Glasgow, to explain to us what Glasgow is doing, is intending to do, that fits under the Glasgow Declaration on Food and Climate. Please, the floor is yours, Ms. Aitken.
Hello, it's a pleasure to be here and a pleasure to join so many inspiring local and municipal leaders here this afternoon. Glasgow's status, obviously, as the host city for COP means that we are very much looking forward to welcoming the world to our city next year for probably what's going to be perhaps the most significant diplomatic event of any of our lifetimes in terms of the consequence it has for the future of our shared planet. But we're also in the extra year that we hadn't anticipated that we have in the year up to hosting COP. It's giving us an opportunity and me as the leader of the city, a fantastic opportunity to speak on so many platforms to tell the world our story so that they can understand perhaps why Glasgow, we believe Glasgow is such an appropriate city to host COP26. And in actual fact, it's our imperfections in many ways as a city that make us so appropriate. It's the story of a global titan of the industrial age transitioning to a cleaner, sustainable and more just future. It's something that we all aspire to, but we are also a city still contending with and learning from the legacies of our past. And our history really defines the look and built character of the city. We live our heritage every day. We're still a city largely operating within a 19th century layout And that presents considerable challenges around pollution and congestion and land use. Our iconic tenement buildings, which are all over 100 years old, home to tens of thousands of residents, they're really cherished by our citizens, but they have terrible thermal performance as buildings. And so that's a huge challenge that we have to address if we're going to tackle those 50% plus emissions in the city that are generated from domestic heat and from transport. So right now we're accelerating an ongoing programme of major redesign of key city thoroughfares to prioritise pedestrian and active travel, reduce the impact and indeed the incidence of traffic. With colleagues at our major universities, we've embarked on a project to work out the best way to retrofit those historic P19 tenements, P1919 tenements to reduce emissions. And that heavy industry of the past left many often toxic scars on our landscape, on the riverside, and actually in the heart of many of our communities. So we are bringing so much of that land back into use as green space for housing, for biodiversity projects, and for growing food and for growing trees. And I think that association with heavy industry and its consequences can sometimes make Glasgow seem like an unlikely candidate to have ambitions to be an exemplar for urban living and sustainable food policies. But many people listening may know that translated from the Scots Gaelic, Glasgow means green place, and we are actually home to some of the largest urban green space of any city in Europe. And we've got a long tradition of citizens growing their own food. So we're building on that with our food growing strategy, which we published a few weeks ago, very much focused on communities, on local communities, empowering and providing practical support to individuals and to community organisations to develop projects to grow fresh and nutritious food, obviously while doing their bit to reduce their carbon footprint in the food system and address the climate emergency. And perhaps of even greater significance is the Glasgow City Food Plan, which is out for consultation, public consultation across the city just now. And that's a collaborative blueprint involving many of our partners in the city, including community-based organisations, our third sector, to build a fairer and more sustainable approach to food policy. We're supporting a growing network of community pantries as a dignified alternative to food banks, as a response to food insecurity, particularly in parts of the city where access to affordable fresh food is limited. And that's usually the areas of highest deprivation. And central to this, and my colleague Mary from the Scottish Government has already alluded to this, is the need to reduce impacts on greenhouse gas emissions from our food system, of course, to increase the food that we produce locally, to reduce waste, but also about creating food resilience, ensuring that everyone in our city can eat healthy, affordable, good food, no matter where they live, their income, their personal circumstances. Because the Glasgow message as we head towards COP is that climate justice and social justice are inseparable, that we cannot separate them, and that social justice and social equity must be driven both alongside and from and within climate action. So for our citizens in Glasgow and for citizens globally, of course. So that's our message, and food has an enormously important part of that. So delighted to be speaking at this today and to be helping to launch something that bears the name of the Glasgow Declaration, a proud moment.
Indeed, many thanks, Ms. Aitken, and very best wishes for the Glasgow City Food Plan's next steps. I think it's extremely important that just like Mayor Elliker a few minutes ago, you emphasized the need to work towards social justice and reduction of inequalities at the same time that we reform food systems. And indeed, the reduction of social and economic inequalities is part of the food justice concept that Mayor Elliker just described in the US context. Let me now turn perhaps to a third intervention, this time from Southern Europe, from the city of Barcelona. Mr. Álvaro Porro is the City of Barcelona Commissioner on Social Economy, Local Development and Food Policy. And he is uniquely well placed to tell us about the commitments of Barcelona in this area and which good practices Barcelona is now experimenting. So perhaps, Mr. Álvaro, you could take the floor now.
Yes. Hello, everybody. Thank you very much. Well, first of all, I'm very grateful to be invited as Barcelona City to this amazing conference and to sign in the road to Glasgow Declaration. I'm very honored to share the floor with cities like Glasgow, New Haven, and other cities that are going to be following us. So thank you very much, IPES-Food and Nourish Scotland for the invitation. Yeah, I would like to share our work, our path in this sense. I have to be very honest, but for cities in Spain, local food policies is a kind of new field. Is normally food policies were being launched by national government or even regional governments, but not so much by cities governments. And Barcelona, in this sense, is trying to break the ice and create a kind of holistic food policy approach from the cities in Spain, following the example of other countries and cities in other parts of the world. So we are building up this as a new field for local policy in our city. We have to say that we are having a very good response from a lot of different departments, and we are having over 90 different policy actions to be launched in the next year, in 2021. So it's something we are building in. I'm just going to explain about a couple of examples that I think they are quite relevant, and they are kind of bringing us some insights about what is the work we are doing and what is the results we can find. I'm going to talk about what the work we are doing with the school system. I think is probably one of the fields where cities we could make one of our main fields of work related to food. Basically, we have, I don't know how it works in other cities, but in Barcelona, the city hall is responsible of kindergarten. And that means over 100 kindergarten all over the city with almost 9,000 kids. And we are responsible of their food and their meals. And then for already 2 years, we've been ensuring that all the fresh food is organic through public procurement measures. So all the food is organic, and also for most of the main references for fresh food, over 14, is locally produced. Apart from a low carbon diet and vegetarian options for any school. That means a very huge change in the food approach of kindergartens in our cities. And we are now working in extending all that to primary school, which is a lot more schools, but it's not depending strictly from the City Hall of Barcelona. So that means we have to work with other governments in the regional or national level to afford that. But we expect that now we have a pilot project, and we expect that in 2021 we could scale up for most of the primary school in the whole of Barcelona. Then we don't have still results on the impact of that, but last week it was presented a paper on that. And if all our policies are related to school are delivering good results in the next coming years, approximately the reduction of climate change emissions will be of 53%. So it will definitely be a significant change. Another element that we are trying to work now related to school is how we can regulate the presence of fast food retail places near the schools, which normally promote high climate change footprint diets in our schools. So that's another regulation we are trying to work. Although cities we have limitations on that aspect. And apart from the schools, the other example I want to use is related more to the retail local system. Barcelona is a city with where still a small local retail foods shops are very much present in all over the city. over 40 markets with more than 9,000 people working and 60 million visitors per year are still functioning. So it's not only like supermarket chains delivering food in selling food in Barcelona, but it's also these local markets with a long history that is still alive. So we are working on how we can make sure that these markets that help us to keep alive the streets of our city could also be the main channel for sustainable food products in our homes, in our families. So we are working basically, we just inaugurated last week Bio Market, which is the first specifically organic food market within our wholesale market in Barcelona. We are talking about 9,000 square meters of exclusively dedicated to wholesale market for organic food. And that means about 50,000 tons that we want to be distributing in the next 5 years per year as a kind of big change in the volume of organic food that is arriving to our local markets. Within that, there will be a local food exchange center promoting short circuits, which will allow all these 40 local markets in Barcelona to deliver organic and local food to their customers in a massive way compared to what is being done until now. And to also prevent food waste, we are also building up, and it's going to be inaugurated in the next months, a food waste prevention center within this wholesale market, which is going to be saving 4.5 million tons of food per year. So basically, we think that food waste is another important element in order to tackle climate change from the food perspective. So that will be some of the examples of what are we working on, and that we hope we can exchange practices and exchange learnings with other cities, and share our successes or fails.
Thank you very much, Ms. Alvaro Porro, for this news from Barcelona, and the work done on schools, reducing by 53% the climate footprint of school meals, the work done on the retail system with particularly the establishment of this new wholesale market for bio food, for organic foods, which will be an incredibly important tool to support local producers switching to organic systems. And finally, the fight against food waste. These are extremely important levers that Barcelona is now testing, and we very much welcome its support to the Glasgow Declaration. Let me now turn to a totally different part of the world, to the city of Surakarta, also known as Solo, in the central Java in Indonesia. We have now representing the city of Surakarta, the city secretary to the mayor of Surakarta, Mr. Ayani Ma. The floor is yours, Mr. Ma, to explain to us what you do in Solo, Surakarta, on these issues, please.
Thank you. You give me a time to present a short brief about Surakarta city. Can you hear my voice? My sound is clear?
We hear you very well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Surakarta. Okay. Surakarta is the city, small city in Central Java of Indonesia. Our city wide only 44 square kilometer, and population is more than 575,000 people. This is very, very dense in the city. According to this meeting, I would like to thank you, because our city invited to join in this declaration. It is very important for our city, because our city is very, very small and the density is very high. So the declaration about the food and climate change is very important to our city, to develop environment friendly in our city. According to the food in our city, because our city we don't have any natural resource in our city. Although in my country, we are granted in the fertilized land in Indonesia, but our city, this is very dense and the population very high. Also, the city has a built-up area more than 80% is built area. So we only have a very small open space and green area. So, and to realize the policy to provide the food and climate change to face with climate change in Surakarta, we want to realize that about the living granaries and areas with the integration of urban farming, such as vegetable, fruits, animal husbandry, and fisheries in the community with intense and sustainable assistance. This means that we want to increase the availability of access and to use the food and for the family through the sustainable food yards, diverse, nutritionally balanced and safe foods can be produced as well as to increase family income. These activities such as creating a horticultural nursery, also optimization of narrow space through verticulture, hydroponic, aquaponic, that means combination between vegetable and fisheries, and then processing the marketing and agriculture products, and then fish farming in the container. Also, the last is household scale chicken farm. This means that we want to use the home yards or the narrow space in urban farming activities by using verticulture, vertiminiponic, and then aquaponic, cultivation, and hydroponic methods, followed by training and mentoring from agriculture extension agents. By doing so, the food chain is getting shorter. People can harvest vegetable and fish from their own yards. This method will reduce gas emission from the food distribution. Also, we can use lower the temperature in the dry season, more or less in 2 degrees lower from dry season or hot. I think this is the short message from our city. It is very important for us to implement urban farming in our city. Thank you.
Well, many thanks, Mr. Ma, for highlighting the need for more green spaces in urban areas to lower the temperature in cities, which is indeed an extremely important contribution that urban farming can make for the benefit of the health of the local population. We now will turn to Lima, which is almost the last city on our map of speakers. We shall then have a short video statement from Milan. But first, we turn to Quito, and we turn to Mr. Wilson Merino Rivadeneira, who is the Executive Director of the Economic Development Agency of Quito in Ecuador. Mr. Merino Rivadeneira, the floor is yours. And I remind all participants that they may use the interpretation facility if they wish to listen not to the Spanish, but to the English or French versions of the intervention of Mr. Merino Rivadeneira. It is in the box bottom right of the Zoom screen. Please, the floor is yours.
Buenos días, gracias por la invitación para la ciudad.
Thank you for inviting the city of Quito to participate in this meeting. It's a real honor to share the presence in this panel. We are convinced that good nutrition and good health, as well as sustainable food producing systems in a context where the demography is growing, as well as the climate threats, this is one of our main challenges. The food system in Quito is very dependent, vulnerable, and diverse. Dependent because there's a huge gap between what we consume and what we produce. Vulnerable due to the natural catastrophes that could affect the whole of the territory of Quito, and diverse because the food and nourishment situation is very diverse throughout the city. Quito is a member of the Red 40 and wants to develop a series of climatic initiatives according to the Paris Agreement. And we want to achieve this neutral carbon footprint by 2050 through the adoption of measures, developing a robust plan and a monitoring system describing how governance has to be carried out and who has to carry it out to achieve these goals. Governments for climate change in Quito has declenched a transition process from a digital environmental perspective that before didn't include food. Now we have a climate action for 2020 that included different actors and tried to create synergies between the different actions on a local level, but also with a transversal horizontal level, including the different government levels. The city focuses on actions for the key sectors, for example, the provision and management of water resources, of digital coverage, to guarantee ecosystemic systems, to protect vulnerable systems, energy supply, healthcare supply, basic need coverage, and all of this coordinated with food and agricultural safety programs. In the program for food security, we highlight the need to protect ecosystems, to guarantee the food resources for the future, a proper management of food waste, to reduce waste, but also to recover the waste and redistribute food. This is a particular element within our plan for Quito, and we were able to identify the weaknesses through an analysis in 2017 using a FAO and a LOAF methodology focused on the local and regional level, and also analyzing the agricultural yield. This highlighted how vulnerable our food production systems were, not only considering natural threats, for example, earthquakes, volcanoes, floods, droughts, but we also realized that our agricultural system was not efficient enough to provide food for the whole urban population. So we decided to develop a plan including all different actors. And through this plan, we want to launch a system that generates food governance, a proper management of food resources focused on the future, food safety, a proper management of waste, a link between the urban and the rural area, and an inclusive economy. And all of this is coherent with the commitments that we signed under the Milan Pact, the development of urban sustainability, and the Sustainable Development Goals. Our Quito plan includes agriculture and sustainable systems that are compatible with the protection of the climate, and our plans were approved in December of this year, and we will present it officially in January of next year, 2021. And in this way, we were also able to build up a food resiliency strategy for Quito, which also has a systemic, multi-actor, multi-level perspective, identifying vulnerabilities of the food system and the different steps of the system that will guarantee food safety, making sure that all the links of this chain can work without any hiccups, especially during times of crisis that we have seen now with the COVID-19, highlighting the weaknesses of our chain and of the vulnerability of a large part of the rural population, and how we needed to have a system that was more resilient. And all of this has been achieved through the agriculture and urban development plan that we have been developing for the past 16 years in Quito that has enabled us to activate over 3,500 vegetable gardens and producing tons of vegetables to get closer to a sovereignty and food safety.
Many thanks indeed, Mr. Merino Rivadeneira, for this summary of what Quito has been doing over the past few years. It's extremely impressive. And we are very delighted that Quito joins in this global initiative. Now, in the course of preparing the Glasgow Food and Climate Declaration, many questions, of course, arose concerning the relationship between the Glasgow Declaration on the one hand and the other dynamics that have been taking place, including the C40 cities committed to combat climate change, and of course, the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact that was announced in October 2015 when the mayor of Milan brought together a number of mayors from different parts of the world in order to sign the very important Milan Urban Food Policy Pact. Of course, the Glasgow Declaration is different but complementary, since its emphasis is on climate change and since its emphasis is on the need for local government's efforts to be supported by higher levels of government. And so we are very pleased that Milan is joining in this effort, entirely consistent with the Milan Food Policy Pact and its ambitious network of cities. And we have a short video statement from Ms. Anna Scavuzzo, the Vice Mayor of Milan, responsible for the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact, who shall highlight these complementarities. So please, if we could just show this, this video, which lasts a bit more than 3 minutes, please.
Hello, I am Anna Scavuzzo, Vice Mayor of Milan. Milan will host the preparatory negotiation to the COP26 and the first Youth for Climate Forum 2021. So I am glad to be with you and salute our fellow city of Glasgow. And thanks to IPES-Food and Nourish Scotland for the opportunity to share a few words about our actions as City of Milan and as Milan Urban Food Policy Pact network that comprise nowadays over 200 of cities. As we well know, our current food systems have consequences for the people and for our planet, including contributing to the climate emergency. Just 2 weeks ago, the UN Secretary General delivered a powerful speech on the state of the planet, calling for increased ambition on climate change action over the coming year. And our local communities are urging us to address climate change with all means we have. So I will start by sharing two main results of our action in Milan. First of all, we have a very important activity on food waste reduction. We have been working to motivate and coordinate all city stakeholders to minimize food losses by redistributing food to the people in need. And the second relates to the planetary health diets. We are very proud of our achievements in including more plant-based foods in our school canteens. Amid a global health and planetary crisis, taking stock of the positive impact of our actions on our city environment has never been more important. In 5 years, we reduced by 20% the greenhouse gases emissions of our school canteens, saving more than 50,000 tons of CO2 just last year. In 2019, we also eliminated 800 tons of CO2 thanks to food waste prevention. With our food policy, we connect different departments of the municipality. We have been able to lead the food system transformation of Milan to be more sustainable and inclusive. As founding members of the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact and active members of the C40 cities, Milan is also part of the wide partnership of like-minded cities, extensively working to foster climate action through a renewed food system approach on global agendas. The Milan Pact cities are working with all of you so that the voice of cities, regions and subnational governments can be strongly heard at the COP26 in Glasgow last year. Naturally, this needs multilateral support, horizontal and vertical integration of governance, collaboration between different policy areas and involvement of many segments of society. Many Milan-Pact cities of all sizes and regions have already committed to sign the Glasgow Declaration in addition to Glasgow and Milan, thanks to, for example, Paris, Barcelona, Valencia, New Haven and Antananarivo. And I commend the commitment made by fellow cities, and I trust many others will follow. I want to conclude with one message. We, cities, are ready to play our part in pioneering integrated food strategies to tackle climate change and drive food system sustainability. We call all national governments to join our efforts and commitment to accelerate climate action for food system transformation. And now I'm sure our collective effort will bring even greater results. Thank you very much.
Well, many thanks to Anna Scavuzzo, the Vice Mayor of Milan, for this very strong message. We cities are ready. We are waiting for national governments to support our efforts better in order to achieve this vertical coordination that we emphasized since the start of this discussion. And I think that is very much the heart of what is in the Glasgow Food and Climate Declaration. Let us now turn to the last part of this discussion, which will bring together a number of participants in this meeting who either have signed the declaration and shall explain in 1-2 minutes perhaps the reasons for doing so. And then we'll open the floor to questions and answers from the participants, although it is not certain we shall have much time to deal with those questions. Those that cannot be dealt with shall be responded to in writing based on what is inserted in the chat box that you used. Let me now turn to the first of the cities that will make a declaration explaining their motivation to join, and that city is Paris. It is my great pleasure to welcome in this discussion Ms. Audrey Pulvar, the deputy to the mayor of Paris, Anne Hidalgo, in charge of sustainable food, agriculture, and short food chains. Madame Audrey Pulvar, la parole est à vous. Merci de nous rejoindre.
You have the floor.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. Good evening or good afternoon to everyone. I'm sorry, but I will be the first panelist to speak in French. If I dare, I could say, pardon my French, but I'm the deputy mayor of Paris, and we are very proud of our national language, which is French. So, je vais continuer donc.
Let me continue in French. Just to say that I'm delighted and honored to represent Anne Hidalgo, the mayor of Paris, whom you all know. This is very important for the city of Paris. It was very important to sign this Glasgow Declaration. Cooperation between cities and groups is paramount at a European and international level if we want to tackle this common issue, if we want to have accessible quality food for each and everyone, and if we want to transform farming practices to ensure decent and regular income for farmers, but also if we want to reduce the impact of farming and food on nature and reduce the greenhouse gases as well. Since 2014, Paris has been carrying out an ambitious policy to develop agriculture and farming areas, organic and sustainable farming areas, and this policy allowed us to reach some results because we just finished the first mandate of Anne Hidalgo, and the second one is starting. And more than 50% of canteens in Paris, I'm talking about kitchens in schools, but also in senior centers and canteens for public servants, i.e. 30 million meals a year. are sourced from organic or sustainable farms. And Hidalgo is ecologist and has major ambitions for ecology. And as a consequence, she has created the delegation I am chairing today, the delegation for agriculture, sustainable fooding and proximity. And she defined several targets, the one of going from 53 to 100%, i.e. by 2026, of organic or sustainable food in the public canteens, and 50% of local food. As a consequence, we will have to work with the farmers from Île-de-France, with different stakeholders to transform logistics and farming. We will need to change the habits as well. Île-de-France, Paris, is the first region the first farming region in France with a conventional, traditional type of agriculture. And it's not it's not that diversified nowadays. As a consequence, we'll have to work with the different stakeholders to change this and to transform farming in Paris and its region. To be in line with this transformation, you are also committed to. And I think that today we need to have such a transformation, and to do this while cooperating at the European and international level. We need to have common targets, and this is why, well, we are delighted to be with you today and to be on board with this declaration.
Thank you very much for those very encouraging words. And of course, it is always important to think of the challenges of the horticultural products. It's even more true for the cities, Paris and Brussels, where I live. So I admire your efforts.
Let us now turn to the second city who wishes to explain their, and I'm just removing my interpretation, I'm sorry. The second city which requested to explain their position and their reasons for joining the Glasgow Declaration, and that is London, with Ms. Claire Pritchard, who shall explain what is being done in London. We are running a bit short of time, so I'm sure Ms. Pritchard, in the spirit of conciseness and in order to allow other speakers to intervene, you can summarize the message in not much more than 2 minutes, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, and I just want to say how honoured I am to be here, and it's great to be sharing this platform with so many incredibly inspiring, innovative cities. So, yeah, very quickly, I'm here representing the London Food Board, and we've had a board in London since 2004, and an integrated food strategy since 2005. And we are members of the C40 Milan Pact Sustainable Food Cities, as Pete mentioned in his introduction. And we hugely welcome Glasgow's Food and Climate Declaration, because we recognise that as much as these are related and integrated, we need a focus on climate and the impact on climate, and also the request to our governments to respond. And I think cities are showing what they can do and pushing boundaries, and you've seen the work we've done in London on planning and advertising, and that's why I welcome this partnership across this incredible group of inspiring cities. So thank you, and thank you for letting me be here today.
Thank you very much for your intervention from London, Ms. Pritchard, and we welcome indeed the leading role that your city plays in this global movement. I see in the chat box that we have interventions from Rosario, Argentina, Arusha, Tanzania, and quite a few others. It's quite impressive to see how these cities benefit from sharing experiences. But we now turn to a city that is not so far from London, which is Brighton and Hove, which is very close to my heart, because I've been following quite closely with great admiration the adoption and regular updating of the Food Strategy Action Plan, originally adopted in 2006 in Brighton, and that led Brighton to be awarded the first Silver Sustainable Food City Award in the UK in 2015. And to discuss this, or to present this, we have with us Mr. Mac Cafferty, who is council leader of Brighton and Hove. Mr. Mac Cafferty, the floor is yours, please. Thank you.
Thank you, friends. I'm Councillor Phelan McCafferty, and as the leader of Brighton and Hove City Council, I'm extremely proud to sign the Glasgow Declaration today. As cities, we call on national government to play their full part in securing sustainable food and farming at the heart of the global response to the climate emergency. On the eve of COP26, it is an enormous privilege to join with cities across the world, from as far away as Madagascar to Indonesia, as we articulate our shared commitment to tackle the climate emergency through integrated thinking about food. Our relationship with food through the COVID-19 pandemic has been put under more strain and scrutiny than ever before, and it is appropriate to end the year determined to win a healthier, more sustainable relationship with food in our cities and around the world. And only weeks ago, Brighton and Hove became the only place in England to win a Gold Sustainable Food Places Award. And that achievement reflects our trailblazing approach, and the city can lay claim to some outstanding achievements, particularly in the face of the pandemic, spearheaded by the excellent Brighton and Hove Food Partnership. At the height of the first lockdown, the city's emergency food network grew to support over 3,000 adults and 1,000 children with food parcels. The climate emergency Brighton and Hove declared 2 years ago is tied intimately to food because, of course, a whole third of greenhouse gases come from food, and as such, commitments on food are central to our drive to be carbon neutral by 2030. While we as cities will play our part, making our cities more resilient to fluctuations to our food supply, we now need all of our national governments to play their part too. And how our cities can produce our own food waste, and what we consume factor into this, as it does in all international cities. 5 years since Paris and ahead of COP26, we come together through the Glasgow Declaration to drive down emissions, to create healthier cities and a fairer planet for us all.
Great, fantastic. Many thanks, Mr. McCafferty, for this, and congratulations on the Gold Sustainable City Award. I hadn't been informed of this, but I know that you were moving to get the gold medal, and I'm delighted that your efforts have been so brilliantly recognized by this award. My very sincere congratulations to all those involved, and to you personally in particular. Let us now turn to the last city we would like to hear from, which is Istanbul. And here I have the great pleasure to give the floor to my colleague, Ms. Hilal Elver, who was the special rapporteur on the right to food for the United Nations between 2014 and 2020. She had 6 years in this position, during which she advocated for the right to food globally. And she now supports the city of Istanbul in Turkey in their efforts to build a sustainable food systems. Istanbul is one of the early signatories of the Glasgow Declaration, and it's with great pleasure that I would like to invite Hilal Elver to say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Olivier, for the presentation. And it's lovely to be together again with old friends and the new. And now I have a different hat, and I'm very pleased to represent my city of Istanbul, 16 million, literally in the middle of the two continents, and with lots of challenges and some opportunities. And we are very pleased to learn from each other. And I have a very good experience with the city of Glasgow. When I was special rapporteur, they invited me, and they were trying to make the first right to food city in Europe. still in the process. And I'm very happy that Glasgow Declaration, I'm hoping that more strongly right to food will be included to the declaration to give a certain kind of desire that right to food should be globally accepted, especially as much as climate change problems. That's of course big if, but that would be our, I think, first goal. I don't want to spend too much time because it's a fantastic to listen every day. Our mayor of Istanbul is very happy and congratulate to all of you, and we'll do our best to be a learner and hopefully implementer in good policies. Thank you.
Fantastic. Many thanks, Hilal, for these very encouraging words again, and for all the work you did inter alia in Glasgow. I know that First Minister Nicola Sturgeon is very much in support of what is done in Glasgow and indeed in other Scottish cities around this issue. So unfortunately, we shall not have time to really respond together to the many questions raised in the chat box, but I can commit on behalf of IPES-Food to list those questions with some summary answers on the website of the Glasgow Declaration in order to make sure that nothing that is precious gets lost in the process. With my apologies for not having time to discuss them now live, but you will probably recognize with me that the interventions were extremely rich and dense, and it would not have been possible to shorten them beyond what we've attempted to do in this event. I now have the immense pleasure and indeed the honor to give the floor to a very dear friend, José Graziano da Silva, who gained recognition in Brazil first as the extraordinary Minister for Food Security in the government of Lula Inácio da Silva between 2003 and 2004, when the Fome Zero program was launched, which was really a success story that many countries later tried to imitate, given its impacts on reducing child malnutrition in particular. And later, as you know, José Graziano da Silva was elected as Director General of the FAO, a post that he occupied between 2012 and 2019. And there he was responsible inter alia for launching the Coronovia process that links agriculture and food to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change process, basically putting agriculture on the agenda of global climate change negotiations. So we're extremely indebted towards José Graziano da Silva for his work on the right to food, for his work on local food systems. Brazil has been leading in this context also, and of course, for his role as former DG of the FAO. And today, José Graziano remains active as the director of the Institute Fome Zero. So, José, if I may, the floor is yours, and many thanks for giving us your concluding remarks in a few minutes.
Thank you very much for the invitation, Olivier, and especially thank you very much for these kindly words. Well, I would like first to start what is the meaning of the SDG number 2, that is known as the Zero Hunger Goal. I quote, end hunger, achieve food security, and improve nutrition, and promote sustainable agriculture, end quote. Most of the times we forgot this last part, promote sustainable agriculture. Agriculture, in this case, encompass crops, livestock, fisheries, and forest sector altogether. It means that Zero Hunger Goal is not only about eradicating hunger. It means much more. It means addressing a systemic approach on how to deal with food and environment. That means that we need to consider food system approach, all food chains, not only agriculture or nutrition per se. It is about promoting sustainable systems that can afford the sustainable production of nutritious food for all. For this, we need to ensure that we have available healthy soils, healthy seeds, healthy diets, and use sustainable agriculture practices like the ones provided by agroecology. That means also that food systems and climate change must be addressed together in a unique approach. It can improve the health of water and soils and ease the pressures that drive deforestation. Let me highlight that actions to promote resilience in agriculture sector cuts across the usual distinction between adaptation and mitigation, valid for other economic sectors. But in agriculture, as we adapt, based, for instance, on environment-friendly agroecological techniques, we are also helping mitigate the effects of climate change. This offers a powerful new paradigm in response to climate change and hunger eradication. Colleagues, we have already spent more than 25 years talking about climate change and its impact. Until the COP21 in Paris, agriculture was seen only as a threat to climate change, a villain, a problem. As DG of FAO, I was vocal to say it was actually the opposite. Agriculture could be part of the solution, not only a problem, if properly managed. We advocate for increased investment and works to strengthen national institution capacity and local capacity to deliver on adaptation and mitigation, particularly for developing countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. 2 years late from Paris, in Bonn, 2017, COP23, I was part of the FAO delegation that led the negotiation to the landmark decision reached on the Corona-Via joint work on agriculture. With the Corona-Via decision, a broad set of interventions were considered, with food security and resilience, sustainable livelihoods, part of the touchstone goals promoted. I see the Glasgow Food and Climate Declaration as a step forward to endorse the need of a comprehensive approach of food system in the climate negotiations, as the way we did for Corona-Via for agriculture sectors. It's very and timely welcome. I also see the early engagement of cities and subnational government as key for achieving this goal. We need a sustainable way to produce more fresh food and ensure that they are affordable, widely accessible, and valuable for market. And for that, local governments, the cities, are the relevant actors for promoting this. I would like to end saying that local government play a vital role shortening the circuits of production and consumption and reducing food loss and waste, as we have seen for many of the expositions that we heard here today. I applaud the Glasgow Food and Climate Declaration as an important step to consolidate the view and the need for sustainable food systems that are more resilient to climate change in the COP26. Thank you very much for your attention.
Well, thank you very much to José Graziano da Silva for these concluding remarks. We are extremely, as I said, indebted to his work on the right to food, on food systems, but also, as he recalled, on agroecology. I think for a city like Brighton and Hove that was mentioned by Mr. McCafferty, that aims to achieve climate neutrality by 2030, it's impossible to do this without healthy soils that can store the carbon, absorb the carbon, and allow, as Jose Graziano mentioned, allow agriculture from being a problem to becoming a solution to the existential threat of climate change. And I think this message about sustainable agriculture, agroecology, and how food systems can contribute is extremely important. We need not only to reduce the ills, the bads from food systems, we also need to transform them into a positive force for the good. So in concluding, I would like to simply invite you to follow this process continually. We have an invitation already from Alvaro Porro to join the Milan Pact Global Forum of Cities that is convened in Barcelona in October 2021, just weeks before the Glasgow COP26. And that will be a good opportunity for cities to express their willingness to contribute to climate change mitigation by reforming food systems. And of course, the C40 Cities Network and the Milan Urban Food Policies Pact network of cities and that will be the message we need to send to all national governments, that cities are ready, local governments are ready, regions are ready. They need more support at higher levels of governance in order to be able to move faster and to move in a way that is more flexible and that allows them to rebuild those local food systems. So with this, I would like to again thank you for your very inspiring remarks, for your support, and for spreading the word further. Many thanks to all, and good end of the day to all.
The interpreters wish you a lovely day. Goodbye.
Thank you very much to the interpreters.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye from Paris. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.